This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo, giving you the inside track on all the big talking points from Anfield.
Hello and welcome to this week's Liverpool.com podcast. I'm Matt Addison. Michael Plant is with me. We're going to talk a little bit about some Liverpool contracts. We're going to talk a little bit about Curtis Jones as well, and then look ahead to the rest of this season. Have Liverpool turned a corner? It's a question I think we've all probably asked over the last few weeks. We will try to give you a decisive answer to that question, as difficult as that might be. But before we get into it, we want to thank one of two show sponsors today. NordVPN and their app can help you with things like watching sporting events, TV shows and films which aren't available in your region by switching your virtual location to a country which is showing the event. For example, if you're abroad, you can then access all of your streaming services as you would do if you were at home. You can also protect private data like bank details, passwords and online identity, and you only need one NordVPN account that can be used on up to 10 devices. For more benefits and more information, you can download the NordVPN app to your device and click the link in the podcast episode description box below. And don't forget, to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, you can go to nordvpn.com/bloodred. That link gives you 4 extra months on top of the 2-year plan, and there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. As I mentioned, the link is in the podcast episode description box below. Let's get stuck into some contract talk, though, Michael. There's been a lot of agent talk, it seems, this week in terms of Szoboszlai and Mac Allister in particular. Well, maybe not agent in the case of Mac Allister, his dad. Maybe they're the same person, I'm not too sure. But let's start with Dominik Szoboszlai, the man of the season in many ways so far for Liverpool. He confirmed in the mix zone a few weeks ago that talks have happened between his representatives and Liverpool under contract until 2028. There seems to be a recurring theme that some people see him as a future Liverpool captain, but obviously that will only happen if he does commit to stay at Anfield beyond the end of his current contract term. So, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? There's links with Real Madrid, there's contract talks, there's all sorts of elements to this, but I suppose the bottom line is when you've got a player playing as well as Dominik Szoboszlai, you basically need to make that a priority for him to stay.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. Liverpool need to ensure that this doesn't become a contract saga. Like, I think we've seen a few recently over the last couple of years, and he's too important for that to be the case. I think as a midfielder as well, he's obviously got a slightly higher value. So I think he's 25, isn't he, as well? So there's still plenty of value in him as a player. So to let that contract dwindle would be a real mistake on Liverpool's part. And listen, I think that Szoboszlai clearly wants to stay. He has outlined that. I was in the mix zone when he spoke about it after the Newcastle game, and he said that he wants to stay, that there's no reason not to. I mean, you can read in these things a couple of ways. You do wonder whether he was saying a little bit, right, make me the right offer and I'll sign it, or whether he was just kind of shrugging his shoulders saying, listen, I'm not worried. He's got over 2 years left in his contract, so there's plenty of time to get it sorted. And you know, just to reiterate what you said, Matt, that he has been absolutely outstanding this season, and particularly actually in the last couple of weeks. I think he scored 5 in his last 8 games, and you know, that's outstanding considering, I mean, a lot of times playing right back, a lot of times playing, you know, deeper midfield, more attacking, in the kind of number 10 role, and he's excelling wherever he's playing, really. And I think that he has kind of attracted a lot of headlines. You know, you mentioned the Real Madrid stuff, although I don't actually think there's actually really anything in that other than his international manager saying, oh yeah, when he was a kid he used to want to play for Real Madrid, which, I mean, how many millions of people does that apply to? But he's also, even Salah, saying he's one of the best players in the world. He's obviously been compared to Steven Gerrard recently, and you know, you and I are particularly across this in our role at just picking up all these little stories, and he just feels like that the moment is constantly to do with Szoboszlai, and I think it underlines just how well he's playing at the moment, and what a fantastic season he's having for Liverpool.
Yeah, 10 goals so far this season, which is really impressive. I remember Arne Slot mentioned last season how if he's going to play as a number 10, he's got to score more goals and have more of a final third impact. It's ironic in a way that he's played much deeper and not been as close to goal, but has still scored a lot of goals, and I suppose not many of them have been that close to goal. Quite a lot of them have been from 30 yards out going into the top corner, but he's just been such an important player for Liverpool. For me, I think the Real Madrid stuff, the stuff around him, the talk and the chatter, it's probably just a product of he's Liverpool's best player at the moment, and that is kind of what happens, isn't it? We've seen that with Trent, we've seen that with Konate. There's going back a few years, there was always, a question of will Real Madrid or Barcelona try and get Mohamed Salah, or will they try and sign Sadio Mane? It just comes with the territory. I think if you're one of Liverpool's best players, that's basically just what happens.
Yeah, I think so. And listen, there was very little in it, and Liverpool are not going to entertain any kind of offers for Dominik Szoboszlai this summer, even if Real Madrid come knocking or whoever else. So he is, he's a fantastic player, as we kind of mentioned there previously. He is someone who Liverpool want to tie down to a long-term contract. And, I think that there maybe is an assumption in certain places that if Madrid come knocking, that Liverpool will automatically, or any club will automatically engage them in talks. And I'd be surprised if that's the case this summer. And I suppose it does feed into the wider conversation though about Liverpool's midfield, because last season it was a very settled 3, wasn't it, with Gravenberch and Mac Allister, and now obviously Curtis Jones has played quite a bit more this season. We've got Florian Wirtz. So I mean, kind of, I suppose, what's your view on it, Matt? Kind of the midfield setup at the moment, how it looks compared to last season.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously changed a little bit, hasn't it, in terms of that formation, and obviously Szoboszlai is a key part of that. He's playing much better, I think, than he was last season. He had a good season last season, but has been another level this season. And I suppose it kind of feeds into the Curtis Jones question. I think there was definitely interest from outside. There was absolutely no interest from Liverpool in selling him in January, but you can understand why teams might be looking at him. The talk of Szoboszlai and Mac Allister's contracts, 2028 for them. It's only 2027 for Curtis Jones, so that's obviously more pressing in terms of getting that sorted out. But I would like one more quality option in that midfield. Obviously, Wataru Endo has played a couple of games recently and now isn't going to play a lot of games moving forwards. I'd like one more in that area. But I'm sure Curtis Jones probably doesn't want that, because he's one that hasn't played as much as what he likes. So it's a really tricky balance. I think Szoboszlai, Mac Allister and Gravenberch are your first choice 3 if you're having a 3 in there. But as you say, Wirtz has changed that. And Curtis Jones probably, I think Arne Slot said a few days ago that he probably deserves to have played more than what he has so far this season. So I think there is work to be done in terms of just reshaping it a little bit more. But I mean, the contracts, I think, are going to dictate that to a large extent. If Liverpool were to tie down Szoboszlai, Mac Allister and Gravenberch this summer, and then, Curtis Jones maybe was to follow suit, it then probably makes it difficult to go and get another one in that kind of group of level of players to play in those positions. But I don't know, how do you see this summer going? Is in terms of the midfield, is this a summer of contracts rather than transfers, do you think, for Liverpool?
It's an interesting one, because I think we've spoken about it a lot over the last couple of years, over the last year or so, whether Liverpool could do with a more natural number 6, because I think sometimes you look at the midfield with a balance, particularly last season, obviously, with that very settled 3, and it looks balanced, although the positions are very high up in the pitch, it seems to work. And then there's been a lot of games this season where you've looked at the structure, particularly through the middle, and how easily teams have attacked through Liverpool, and thought, actually, they could really benefit from a more natural holding midfielder, a number 6. Someone, dare I say, in the role of kind of a Zubamendi, that sort of player, who, of course, was a transfer target, wasn't he? And not last summer, the summer before. So I think that is a question mark, really, around it all. You suspect Wataru Endo will probably move on this summer as well. And look, I mean, whether he's really a midfield option for Liverpool, I suppose, is slightly up for debate, to be honest, because Slot's so reluctant to hand him minutes. But I personally would like to see Liverpool get a number 6 in, a more natural sitting, holding midfielder, personally. But I do agree with what you say, that perhaps tying down the contract issues they've got now, which really actually is all 4 of the midfielders from last season, thinking about it now as we're chatting, and they've all got some kind of contract issue hanging over them, haven't they? So, yeah, I think that probably will be the priority heading into the summer. Yeah, what do you think?
Well, I guess it's come about because Szoboszlai, Mac Allister and Gravenberch all arrived in that same summer, didn't they? It's almost the knock-on effect of leaving it too long to revamp the midfield. Last time they had to do that when Henderson and Fabinho left. They lost a lot of players and had to spend a lot of money in one department in one summer. It's, having gone through that period of time, obviously they all signed similar length, long-term contracts at that point. It sort of has not push the issue back, because obviously they were the solution at that time, but it just means that you've got to think about that in the same way again. So It is tricky. I mean, I wanted to talk a little bit about Curtis Jones and his role and how he fits into it. On the number 6 point, I see what you were saying about maybe you need a natural one. To me, Zubimendi is basically Gravenberch. I think that is a similar-ish player. I don't see a huge difference between those two in that number 6 position. And I mean, a couple of years ago, before João Paulinho went to Bayern, there was a lot of Liverpool fans saying, should they go and spend 50 million on him to come in? But I just don't really think that fits into the way that Arne Slot wants to play. I don't think that kind of destructive player who wins the ball back and maybe doesn't have that level of passing range. I just don't really see how that fits into what Liverpool want to do in the long term. It's not one for me. I would much rather have a kind of Gravenberch or even a Curtis Jones in that number 6 position who, okay, they're not going to roam about and put a foot in and make loads of big tackles and stop counter-attacks necessarily, although I think both of them can do that at certain points. I think for me, it's more important to be able to be comfortable in the ball, to be able to take the ball off the centre-backs and progress it. That's much more important. Now, if there was a Fabinho out there who could do both and could be, off the ball very much perfect at his best, but also brilliant in possession, then absolutely fine. Rodri, someone like that is unbelievable, but I just don't. I can't think of anyone. Now, maybe Liverpool's scouts have got someone in mind that they can go and do that with, but I just think the level of player that Liverpool have targeted recently, there's no one out there that you could look at, for me at least, and say, go and get them, and they'll be a perfect upgrade on whether it's Gravenberch. Mac Allister maybe is slightly easier this season to upgrade on, but then that's a slightly different position. To me, I just don't know. I don't know where that player would come from.
Yeah, I mean, I do admit there's no obvious name jumping out, but look, I suspect there is one if Liverpool scouts have a look around. Probably not above the age of about 23, you suspect, and probably one for the future as well. But yeah, where I slightly disagree with you on is maybe the thought that Zubimendi and Gravenberch are the same sort of player. I see Gravenberch predominantly as a kind of a box-to-box midfielder, someone who likes to drive forward in possession of the ball. I don't think his natural instinct is to sit back, shield the back four and look to almost keep the ball ticking over, like Rodri, for instance, as an example. But listen, maybe that's not what Swat wants from his midfield. And I do think there's probably a case that is a little bit of the truth, because I think that if he did want that, he would have pushed to get a hold of midfielder, and obviously didn't do that. Has kind of transformed Gravenberch into a slightly deeper player. And so, yeah, I think they benefit from a number 6 personally, but as you rightly said, there is no name that's jumping out to me. And I think the midfield is a really interesting one, because it was so settled last season with those 3. Obviously, occasionally Jones came in, but this season there have been a lot of changes, and actually, I think a lot of tactical changes as well. I mean, even at the weekend, they kind of went for more of a 2 in midfield and kind of 2 number 10s floating and then 2 wide players, and which Slot has gone to a couple of times as well. So, yeah, it's a much more interesting, probably because of the issues Liverpool have had in truth, but it's probably a much more interesting position this season to analyse and to discuss than last season, for instance.
And just to go back to Jones as well, just to finish on this section with him, I mean, I think there is a bit of a decision for him to make, isn't there, in terms of his future, obviously with the contract, with interest from elsewhere. I'm sure Liverpool wouldn't want to lose him for a variety of reasons, not least that he's a homegrown player and is obviously an important part of the squad. But can you understand from his perspective why he might think he deserves to be playing a little bit more? And especially, I think, in the context of this season with Alexis Mac Allister, probably hasn't been anywhere near the level that Liverpool would have thought that he would be at. I think maybe the last few weeks has started to get a little bit better, but I don't know if you're Curtis Jones, are you thinking maybe there's a decision to be made this summer?
Well, I think there is, isn't there? I mean, I think there's no smoke without fire with Curtis Jones. Obviously, there was the interest from Inter Milan. There have been a lot of talks about his future and what's going to come next. I think he clearly wants to play more. I think he clearly sees himself as a big voice in the Liverpool dressing room. He's been very outspoken on a couple of issues this season. The thing that maybe around December, January time, that maybe he thought that's it, that he'd cracked in the Liverpool team and that he'd really cemented his place. And now suddenly he's out of the team and lacking minutes, which I think he will be very frustrated about. And I think he will want some form of assurances about what he's going forward, or how many minutes he's going to get going forward. And I'd be surprised if Slotting Truth can provide those, because I don't think anyone thinks that he is in Liverpool's best 11. So, yeah, but the other question I've got, maybe to throw back to you, is in all of this, there's been a lot of talk about Alexis Mac Allister. There is certainly interest elsewhere in him. Do you think there's an argument to actually say Liverpool could maybe look to cash in on him this summer and obviously move on a player who's not a particularly good season? They've got Jones, perhaps bringing in a more natural number 6 to provide an extra option in the squad. I don't know what your thoughts are on it.
I wouldn't completely rule it out. My reservation would be, I don't know, and this doesn't just apply to Alexis Mac Allister, in fairness. I think this applies to most good players at the top end of the Premier League. Unless you're signing for PSG or Real Madrid, I just don't know where the money comes from across the rest of Europe, unless you stay in the Premier League. I know there's been links with Manchester United this week with Alexis Mac Allister. I can't necessarily see him wanting to make that move, but I just don't know for Liverpool to move Alexis Mac Allister on and bring somebody else in. There'd have to be a big fee attached to him going out, and then probably an even bigger fee to get somebody else to come in who was a level above him. I just don't know where would he end up, I suppose, would be my question. Would be, could you see him at a Real Madrid or a PSG? Would they see him as a player that they would be able to put, I don't know, 80, 90 million just to pluck a figure out of the air? I just don't know. The Premier League is such a financially better off place than everywhere else in Europe now. I just don't know where these players would go. I think that's what would have to happen. A bit like Luis Diaz last summer, maybe, where I think that there was definitely an argument for keeping him on a sporting level, but when an offer comes in that is just so ridiculous that you can't turn it down, maybe that situation could happen again. But I just don't really see where that would happen for Alexis Mac Allister.
I think one thing that's not going to happen is he's not going to end up at Old Trafford this summer. I would say quite confidently. I mean, this might come back to bite me in a few months, but I'd be amazed if that is the case personally. But I mean, Real Madrid, there's definitely interest there from them. Whether they're going to stump up the money, I don't know. Whether in the last 6 months that interest has waned slightly given his form and his performances, I don't know. I suppose yeah, and the question I was throwing out was, if there is an offer, would you be tempted to accept it? I was actually thinking of Luis Diaz with the player you mentioned there, in that he's a very valuable player, but ultimately moved in the last 2 years of his contract. I think Mac Allister's 28, Diaz was 29, so maybe 27 and 28. So there's maybe the similarities in terms of age. You maybe say, right, actually now is the time to look to move him on. I don't know. I don't think, I'd be surprised if there's anyone in Liverpool that actively wants to move on Alexis Mac Allister, but it's just the way that Liverpool operate. If a good offer was to come in, I could see a possibility where, because I feel like Gravenberch and Szoboszlai and Wirtz are more nailed on starters now than Mac Allister, which is a real surprise, actually, given how well he played last season. But I think there's a world in which if a good offer came in from this summer, Liverpool would be willing to let him go, personally.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that, but I don't think they would sell him to a Premier League team, and that is where the big question mark comes for me. But I don't know, we'll see. I think there's definitely conversations to be had, and when you've got 4 players, 4 key midfielders, there's probably also an argument that signing all 4 of those players to new contracts either this summer or, bit before, bit after, whenever it might be difficult to do all those contracts at the same time as well. I don't know how easy that would be from a negotiating standpoint, but yeah, certainly a lot to think about for Liverpool moving forwards like that. But before we move on to the second part of the show, let's just take a time out to thank the show's second sponsor, which is Saily. Who are Saily? Well, Saily are an affordable, easy-to-use and sustainable eSIM service that gives reliable mobile and internet connections from anywhere in the world. You can save money and eliminate roaming fees with affordable eSIM data plans in over 200 different destinations, and you can have a fast and reliable internet connection upon arrival in your destination. You can download Saily in your app store or by scanning the QR code that is on screen. You can use our promo code, which is in the podcast episode description box below. With that, you get an exclusive 15% off your first purchase, and you can visit saily.com/bloodred for more details. Let's move into the second part of the show, though. We've spoken a little bit about several players who've been in form, certainly in the case of Dominik Szoboszlai so far in the podcast. But let's move on to another few players who've been playing well in the last few weeks, which will lead us into the broad question I mentioned at the start of, have Liverpool turned a corner, and is this the start of a bit of a revival for the Reds after a good couple of weeks? I think it makes sense, Michael, to start with Milos Kerkez, who has been very, very impressive recently. Not the only one of the new signings to look good in recent games, but yeah, what have you made of him, and how impressed have you been with his performances at left back?
Yeah, really good. Really, really turned the corner. I was among those who questioned in truth why he was starting so many games around kind of November, December time. But he's proven me and a lot of others wrong, actually, because his performances have been excellent. I thought against Brighton, he was outstanding, particularly going forward, but also defensively. And that was the big issue, really, in the first couple of weeks, wasn't it? I mean, every game looked like Virgil van Dijk was going to tear all his hair out in frustration at Kerkez's positioning and his movements and everything. But of late, that's not been the case. And he made a couple of really good interceptions and blocks, actually, against Brighton, won the ball back high up. So yeah, he's, look, as you mentioned, he is playing really well. I think he probably embodies this slow, gradual improvement in Liverpool over the last 3 or 4 months, I would say. Let's certainly say from the dark times in November, maybe, when, they lost those 3 games back to back and it looked really difficult. He and the team have improved drastically since then. And yeah, I think from a Liverpool perspective, long may it continue.
Yeah, he's been really good, I think, in the last few weeks. 1 or 2 games aside, he wasn't great at Bournemouth, but has been good in other matches. I just think it was a bit weird that people were so quick to criticise him at the start of the season. When you come in as a 21-year-old for big money, you're put into the team, you're asked to do a different job at a much different level of club with different expectations and all the rest of it. I thought it was a bit weird that people talked him down so much to begin with. I think we're starting to see a little bit more of him now, and I think the same for Florian Wirtz. Obviously, his uptick started a little bit before, probably 6 weeks or so before Milos Kerkez started to find form. He did as well. Hugo Ekitike's been really good. It just feels like those summer signings are really starting to become key for Liverpool now in this period. They've really stepped up. They've shown what they can do. I think that's a big promising sign, I think, for Arne Slot moving forwards. If all of the summer signings last summer had not worked out, I think people would have a different view of where Liverpool are at the moment. But to me, the fact that they're the ones who are doing well, that probably buys in and adds to the fact that you think, well, Liverpool are heading in the right direction. If the new players are starting to play well and take the team forwards, I think that's a good sign, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the funny thing is, and we said this a couple of times recently in the podcast, it's actually the players from last season that are sometimes disappointed in terms of the performances. And I think of late, it's the new signings who have really impressed. Obviously, Kerkez being one, Ekitike, Wirtz as well. So they're really stepping up. And it's, I suppose, still a surprise that there are still underlying issues with the performances when you think that it's a title-winning team that has added this quality to it. But I suppose the whole structure and identity of the team has really changed since last season. And I mean, you mentioned people were quick to jump on Kerkez, certainly in kind of the autumn months. And I agree, there was a lot of unfair criticism at times. I think the problem he had is, and this is certainly the thought I had in those months, was I just looked at the bench and there was Andy Robertson, a player who was very experienced and knew the drill and could have stepped in and at one point certainly done a better job, certainly defensively. And I think where you've got to give Slot credit is that where maybe someone like me thought, right, well, Andy Robertson, the obvious choice is to start him now. Slot stuck with Kerkez, knowing the long-term benefits of it, and he's reaping those rewards now in terms of how he is playing and how much he's enhancing the team and their performances. So yeah, I think it maybe speaks to Liverpool's, as is always the case, that long-term strategic kind of mindset that is employed across the entire club. And Kerkez, again, is probably a really good example of that.
Yeah, it's almost the same, I think, with someone like Florian Wirtz as well. I mean, we saw 1 or 2 games where he was moved out to the left-hand side, but generally Arne Slot's played him as that number 10 and had Gakpo and Salah and various other combinations. But that was the long-term plan. That's what they've stuck to. It very much didn't work for a time, but they've kind of found a way that has started to link together. And I suppose for the next few months, that's definitely something that is promising. There's still elements of the team that we're yet to see. Alexander Isak, I think, will be a success, but they're going to have to be very patient with him when he comes back. At right back, there's still question marks about what that looks like, and there's still injury issues and all the rest of it to contend with. Although I thought Curtis Jones actually was excellent in that position at the weekend. But I mean, what represents success for Liverpool from here? That's the big question. I suppose Champions League football is always the minimum requirement. If Liverpool were to get into the top 5 this season, I think you'd have to say, given what's happened in the last few months, how bad it has been at times, the positions that they've been in. We've had, conversations about, Arne Slot's position and his future and how much pressure he's been under. If Liverpool were to come 5th, is that enough to say, let's just get to the summer, come 5th, move on and forget this all happened? Or do Liverpool need maybe a bit of silverware as well to turn this around fully?
It's a difficult one, isn't it? I think 5th and silverware, we're definitely not talking about concerns. I think 6th in the Champions League, which obviously then would guarantee you a spot in the Champions League next season, probably wouldn't be an issue, maybe. I mean, you'd look at Ange Postecoglou and Spurs and what happened there, albeit look, it's a much more extreme scenario last season. But, as a sign perhaps that league form ultimately is so seen as so vital and so important. I don't know. I think you and I will probably both agree that 6th place and no silverware isn't going to end particularly well for Slot. I think that you need to be ticking at least one of those boxes. I think where you start getting into the realms and having questions about is, 6th place in the FA Cup, for instance. I don't know whether that would be seen as a success. Is 5th place, where you maybe limp over the line, don't end the season particularly convincingly, is that enough as well to silence the doubters? Again, I'm not too sure. So I would probably say 5th would be okay, personally. And then missing out and winning the Champions League would also be seen as okay, probably in my eyes. But what do you think?
Yeah, I broadly would agree with that. I think it depends a lot more on performances for me than results. And by that, I mean, let's say Liverpool win 6 out of the last 7 league games, but they miss out on the Champions League by a point. But you can kind of see Kirkes is playing really well, Wirtz is playing really well. Maybe by that point, Alexander Isak has come back. You can kind of see what the plan is, and there's a little bit of momentum to go into the summer. In that case, I think it becomes even more difficult if they don't get into the Champions League, but you can kind of see the direction they're heading in, because there's that conflict between it's looking a little bit better and, ultimately the results haven't quite been good enough. But I think if they were to miss out on the Champions League and, lose, let's say, a third of the games between now and the end of the season, end it a little bit limply, it almost, you can't dictate the future of a manager based on the vibes or how it kind of feels or that kind of thing. But I do think that will be important. If Liverpool finish this season strongly, regardless of whether that means silverware or not, I think the argument is then there that, okay, this was one season where it didn't really work, but we feel like we're on the right track. We can do a couple of bits in the summer and then go again. And the start of next season is a fresh start. For me, it will hinge on that, really. What does it feel like? We know what it's felt like when it's been a low period for Liverpool this season, and it felt a long way from being able to be turned around. I think if the last month or so of this season was to be better in terms of sort of the performances, the feeling, the sort of general direction that the team is heading in, maybe then you can say, okay, one season of the Europa League, but we're heading back in the right direction. Maybe that makes it viable, but I don't know whether that's likely or not.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I mean, I kind of hinted at that myself with the kind of the limping over the line analogy. There needs to be, it's a good way of putting it, they need to finish this season with the belief that they are moving back forward, that they have put together a young squad that can challenge, I think, probably for the title next season, realistically, for the amount of money that's been spent, for where Liverpool were this time 12 months ago, for the squad that they put together and the talent they have in their group. But I think long term, Liverpool need to be challenging for the title and for silverware at the top end, if not every year, the vast majority of years. And I think that's the question that will probably determine Slot's future in the summer when FSG look at it and think, is Slot the man to lead us to that? So, yeah, that's the big question. But look, I we kind of touched on it. I do think that there's no denying that the team have improved, certainly since around November time. I think there's even in the last couple of weeks examples of where it looks like the team are getting better in terms of, I thought the first half against Sunderland was a real example, I think, of how Slot wants this team to play, in that they were actually quite defensively sturdy, created a lot of chances, dominated possession. And I think for the first time I thought that's what he's been building towards all season. I mean, obviously the Brighton game was very good as well, but as we've seen so many times this season, it can all be undone by one bad result. He has a terrible record against Forest, Slot, obviously, which is the next game. So let's see. I'm yet to be convinced that this is a really good, proper, elite team yet, because I think, well, I certainly have. I think you maybe are the same, but I've been burned by this a couple of times before already this season.
As we sit here right now, can you see Liverpool winning the FA Cup or the Champions League? Because a lot of people have kind of gone, well, win the Champions League and that'll save the season. But I mean, it's easier said than done.
To win the Champions League?
Can you see, as Liverpool are right now, can you see them winning the FA Cup or the Champions League? I think they would have to improve substantially to win the Champions League. The effort, I mean, obviously both scenarios depend on the draw and things like that. You can't predict those kind of things, but I think it's very hard right now to make the argument that Liverpool can win the Champions League.
I don't know. I just think that if you look at the performances of the Champions League this season, they've been really good. They've been the best performances of the campaign, and if they can maintain those levels, maybe step them up a little bit, gradually the team is improving and developing, then maybe. I think they could. Yeah, I suppose in a nutshell, yeah, I think they could. Do you?
Not right now, no. I mean, I'm almost the reverse of you in that I think they can definitely get into the top 4, top 5 places. I think they do that.
Yeah.
I just don't. I don't have the confidence in them over 2 legs. I mean, obviously they've had one-off results this season against Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, teams like that. But I don't know. Over 2 legs, I think is a little bit different. And I'd admit, look, it's a competition. Liverpool have done well from nowhere in the past, but I don't know. I just find it interesting that people have kind of gone, well, the league's gone, maybe we can win the Champions League, and I just don't think I don't think it's necessarily that detached from each other. If you're not playing well in the league, can you win the Champions League? I don't know. I think it's fairly unlikely, but that's only unlikely, I think, if they stay at the same level they are now. If the improvement continues and they can keep key players fit, because that's another big element of this is the state of the squad and the lack of depth in a couple of different areas. If they carry on the way they're heading, yeah, maybe they can play themselves into contention. But literally right now, as we sit here, I'd struggle to make the argument. I think that they would beat PSG, Real Madrid, Arsenal, Man City. I think if they were to come up against any of those teams over 2 legs, I think they'd be very much second favourites.
I don't disagree with any of that. I suppose, the answer to the last question is, is based around, I think they'd have to improve from where they are now, but they are improving. They are slowly improving. And yeah, that has been the case for a while. And as I say, I think they're suited to these Champions League games for whatever reason, whether it's the way the opposition sets up, whether it's the night. They actually have a much better record at night time, don't they, than in the day as well, bizarrely, Liverpool. I don't know. So I listen, I don't disagree with anything you're saying, but I think that they could do it. And look, many times we've seen over the years that the sides that don't have an amazing domestic season, I'm thinking Liverpool 2005, Chelsea 2012 as 2 examples. You can go on and summon these big performances and these nights in the Champions League and go on to win it. So listen, I think it's possible. Right now, do you think it will happen? No, probably not. But I do think it's possible.
Yeah, and as long as they're still in it, then it's something else to look forward to and to think about, isn't it? And that's all obviously always a good thing. And I'm sure we will talk about it plenty of times across the next few weeks about their chances and so on and so forth. But yeah, important that they got into the top 8, but I think so did Tottenham, and I think it's not going particularly well for them. So maybe that's not a huge barometer of where clubs are in the Champions League, but we'll see what happens. We will see what happens for sure. But yeah, I think we'll leave it there for this week. Thank you, as ever, for joining me and for you guys at home as well. And we'll be back next week with the next Liverpool.com podcast.
You've been listening to the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.